Hello, hello, Linda, Dr. Linda Enoh. Let me get that straight.
Yay! Hi, Lucy.
Welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to have you on my podcast. Yay, you're my first guest. Thank you very much.
Yay! I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so like I mentioned to you before I started recording, this podcast is just for us to talk, to catch up, like two African immigrant women living in the USA. I feel as if
Yes.
we're friends, although we've never met in person.
Right. We almost did. But then I think COVID
Yeah, we
happened.
almost did, and then the pandemic happened. Exactly. So yeah, so it's like the joys of the internet. You know what I mean? Like you can
Yes.
have people who are your friends and you've never met them in person, but you're like, hey, just pick up the call and be like, hey, Linda, could you help me
Exactly.
out with this? And in a heartbeat, you said, yeah, sure, I'll help you. So I am so grateful
Oh, of course. Of
for you being my
course.
first guest.
Yes.
So
Anytime.
where do we begin? Okay, so it's about being an African immigrant woman, right?
Hmm.
Um, I like to begin from the beginning. What is your story to coming to the US?
Okay. So I am, it's funny because when it's not in the context of talking about where you're from, like in the context of being African and all that, I always preface it by saying it's a complicated story, but in this context, it's going to make sense. I'm originally from the Congo, DRC, but I was born
Okay,
and raised in Morocco. And
okay,
so after going through like all my life until I was 23, I came to the US for grad school. So I did my undergrad in Morocco, then came to the US for my master's. And then I pursued my PhD, then found my husband, and we got married and got kids. And I've been here for the past 17 years now in Texas.
okay. All the whole time in Texas.
Yes, 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 yes. Texas has been good.
Okay. Okay. Texas has been good. That's good to know. Okay, so that's many years, and I mean, I like your overall summary, right? So I'm gonna probe and ask a few questions in between.
Of
I like
course.
that because I know you from like we've spoken before, and I like that you
Yeah.
say that it's complicated. Like you're originally from the DRC, but you were born in Morocco. So
Hmm.
some people,
Hmm.
if the country that you were born in is what people consider home. So which one do you consider home? Is it the DRC because your parents are from the DRC? Or do you consider Morocco home because you were born in Morocco?
That's where it gets a little more complex because I have never been to the DRC. I
Okay.
went when I visited when I was 18 months old. So I don't know if that counts, but I guess it doesn't really count. I don't really
Okay.
speak Lingala. I know a few words. And so I grew up in Morocco, was born in Morocco. And so Morocco is home, but my parents are not in Morocco anymore. They went back to the Congo. So is Morocco home? It was home until my parents were still there. But because it's my reference of home, of growing up, I would say Morocco is still home for me. The
Okay.
Congo has never really been home. I've never personally considered it home. My brothers maybe do, but for me personally, not really because I've never seen it in my, grown up eyes or even as a kid. So
Okay, so
Morocco
you've
is
never,
home for me.
even though your parents live in the DRC now, you've never been back to visit them in the
No,
DRC.
they moved back, I think 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago that they
Okay,
moved
and
back.
you
So
have.
it was even for them because they lived half of their life in Morocco and now going back to the Congo, it's a new place for them too, in a way.
Okay, that's interesting. The reason I asked that is it leads me to the next question. You know how when you're in the US and
Hmm.
people hear an accent, and the first
Yeah.
thing they ask you, "Where are you from?"
Yeah. And I tell them it's complicated.
Exactly. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So like, what is your answer usually? Like your quick answer, like, where are you
My
from?
my quick answer is I'm from the Congo, but I grew up in Morocco. So that because if
Okay.
I just say I'm from the Congo, they'll say, "Oh," and then they'll ask me about the languages and the food, and I'll be like, I don't really know. I know a little bit." So I just say, "But I lived in Morocco," so that the questions might be directed towards my experience in Morocco more than the Congo, because I know more about living in Morocco than living in the Congo.
So do you give that answer to other Africans who ask you, or do you give that answer to like the Americans who know
Ah,
nothing
that's a
about
good
Africa and they've never been
question.
to Africa? Exactly.
That's a good question. I think to most Africans, I would say I'm from the Congo. Yeah. Like if I meet
Okay.
people, like with my husband, like my husband is originally from Cameroon, but he was born in Connecticut. So he will say, I'm from Cameroon. I would say I'm from the Congo. And then they'll ask
Interesting.
questions. And then, yeah. So I guess it depends on the circle.
It depends on the circle
Yeah.
because like I was born in Kenya, but
Uh-huh.
I've been in the US for 27 years.
Look at that.
I've lived in the US longer than I've lived in Kenya.
Wow. So
And
where is home
depending
for
on
you?
who I talk, exactly, depending on who I'm talking to. If it's other Africans, I say I'm from Kenya, you
Yeah.
know. If it's an American, sometimes I'm like, like it depends on what the conversation is. Because
Yeah.
I truly feel the DC area is
Mm-hmm.
home, even
Yeah.
though I have quite a lot of reference for Nairobi. But like
Mm-hmm.
most of my adult life, like actually all my adult life, big
Yeah.
decisions in my life were all in the DC area.
Look
So
at
I
that.
really have a connection to that area. And sometimes I consider that home, especially now that I
Yes.
live in California. And when people say, "What are you doing for Christmas?" Oh, I'm going to go home. I mean, DC,
DC, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But then sometimes I mean, I'm going to go home to Kenya.
Mm, right. That's
So
like
yeah,
home, home.
so that's like home. But then when I'm in Kenya, sometimes people ask me, "Oh, so when are you going back home?"
Ah,
Meaning, when are you going back to the US? Because I haven't lived there for so long, and they know I don't live there. They ask me, when are you
yes.
going back home?
Yeah.
So those are some of the questions. I'm like, I wonder what other people consider home.
Right. It's a very interesting question. Like yesterday I was looking at I don't know if you've heard about the book Third Culture Kid. I haven't
Yes.
read the book, but I just read heard about it, and so I was searching some YouTube videos about it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I can relate to this and this and this because yeah, that's how it is."
Okay. So I do like that whole Morocco part. So Morocco's home for you, which is even more interesting because people have a perception of what people from Morocco look like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know?
exactly. And it's because and I was a foreigner in Morocco. Like I'm not Moroccan.
Ah.
I don't have
Ah.
citizenship because you don't get it
Even though you
unless
were
you
born there. Even though you
no,
were born
you
there.
don't get it. You have to ask for it and it's a very complicated process because I think it's also mingled with your religion and I'm a Christian, I'm not Muslim, so because citizenship is tied to your faith there. So we've never really bothered to ask for it. And so it's a little complex because even there in Morocco, like I said, I've always been considered and been seen and consider myself a foreigner there. But it's home because it's where I grew up. Now I also consider Houston home. If I talk to people in the US and everybody's sharing where they are from state-wise, I say, hey, I'm
Yeah.
from Houston. I don't say I'm from
Okay.
Morocco. So
Okay.
Houston is
Yeah.
home too because all my kids were born here. This is where I got married and all of that.
I know. Yeah, and I like that you said that your husband was, even though your husband was born in Connecticut, he says that he's from Cameroon.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, and he lived, so he was born here and then he lived his childhood in Cameroon and came back for school for undergrad.
Okay, so maybe
So
that's the connection. Maybe that's
yes,
the
for
connection.
him, like he's
Because I was
more,
wondering
yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering for a child who was just born here and they went to school here and their parents are African. Some of those kids consider themselves fully American, and some actually say
True.
they're African. So it's always interesting to know that. So
Yeah.
okay, so that's good. So now you moved to the U.S. Was Texas the very first place you landed?
I landed in Houston airport and then I went, so I did Casablanca, Frankfurt, Houston, Lubbock, Texas, in the middle of
Okay.
nowhere in Texas. Yes. So Lubbock, Texas was my first American experience, if you
Okay.
will.
And did you stay there for a little while, or was just like a transit and then you went to Houston?
Oh, it was my master's there. So 2 years in Lubbock, Texas.
Oh,
And
so you were
then,
there for 2 years. Okay.
yeah, I went to Texas Tech. So that was 2 years. And then after that, I went straight to Texas A&M. So that was in College Station, closer to Houston. And once I graduated, my now husband had already started working in Houston. So it was an easy transition for me to just It's just an hour and a half from College Station.
Uh,
So
okay. So what was your number one shocking thing when you first landed in the US? Was there anything shocking?
I do remember it. It was at the airport in Houston because where I was sitting, it was so I was in transition, like how do you say that? Like when you're waiting for the next flight. And I was looking through the window at the parking lot, and all the cars were pickup trucks. And I had never seen that before. I mean, yes, we have pickup trucks in Morocco, but not like the big, like GMC, Ford, Ram, like it's huge. And I was like, what is this place? And that was the only thing that I could see was like, it wasn't like the city, it was the parking lot. And so that was my first impression of, I guess, Texas. But in Lubbock, it was how big things were, how food portions, how big they were, how big the cars were, how big the houses were, how big people were, everything's big, like, yeah, really, really big. Yeah,
And I can imagine Texas, yeah, because that's the impression people have of Texas, like just everything is big, big, big,
everything's
big,
bigger in
yeah.
Texas. That's so true. That is so
Yeah.
true.
For me, let me see. I landed in Virginia, Dallas Airport, and
Ooh,
my first impression was like the roads were so wide, you know? Even though we have wide roads in Kenya, these ones were just so massive, like just the many lanes.
yes, the
And
lanes. That's
I
true.
know, and I just could not get over the many lanes. And I remember my sister picked me up, and we were driving home. And then the thing that stands out to me until today is there was on the like a building check, like like bring your check, like see like your check that you write money, like but
Uh-huh.
it was spelled CHECK.
Uh-huh.
And in Kenya we spell check like CHEQUE.
Oh, the French way.
Cause, yeah, because it was on a bank, you know what I mean? And and I kept asking my sister, I'm like, what do they want people to check in the bank? Like, what are they checking, you know? And my sister had been here long enough, and she's
Yeah.
like, your spellings have become horrible. You need to improve on your spelling, you know? And in my head, I was like, oh, like, because she was my older sister, and I was like, yeah, I guess my spellings are
Yeah.
off. Like, I really questioned myself, you know? So it was
She
stuff
knows
like
better.
that. And that I'll never forget. And we were driving home, and that's what caught my attention. I was like, when are people going to the bank to check? Like, what are
Yeah.
they checking?
Ah, that's
But,
interesting.
yeah, so that was like my first thing. So it was the big roads, like just the wide roads. And then
Yeah.
I just saw like a sign that says check at the back. And I'm like, all right, we'll see. Anyway, so yeah, so that was big. So then, okay, so now you're in Texas, you're doing your master's. When did you meet your husband?
So funny story. So he went to A&M. So he did his undergrad in Connecticut at UConn because that's where his parents went. And for his master, he wanted to do an MBA. So he was either doing it at UConn or going away. He was tired of the snow and everything. And his sister was already in Texas. So he was like, let me apply to A&M. And, he's a veteran. He's a black man. So they're like, ooh, double quota for minority. Come on in. We'll give you money to come and study
I
here.
know.
So, so he went to A&M and I was at A&M too. And we met on the campus bus going home. So I was with a friend of mine on the bus. It was a crowded day, end of the day. And I was speaking to my friend. She's French, so we were speaking in French. And then he just started picking up a conversation with us. He's like, oh, vous parlez français? And then we exchanged
Oh, okay.
numbers and all of that. And he graduated, I think that was maybe in January that we met on that day. He graduated December after that. So he invited me for his graduation. And we started dating like a month after that or something. So that's how we met.
And how long had you been in the US at that point?
Me? So I came here in 2004. So it had been, when did we meet? We met in 2008. So it had been 4 years.
Okay. And had
Yeah,
you
so
dated people from other cultures, like Americans or other places, people from other
here,
places?
nothing really. Oh, yes. Sorry. I was currently dating somebody when we met.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Tell
Yes.
the truth.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because we met in January. I was dating somebody and then we broke up 3 months after that. Yeah, so he was an American.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, the reason I ask that is it depends on like and also it depends on the age, like how old you are. I mean, and of course times have changed. Like the new African immigrants, maybe they view the U.S. differently. But
Hmm.
I remember when I first came, it was very much staying in your circle. Like Africans like to stay very much in their circle, so they don't date
Oh,
out. They don't date outside much. They didn't have a lot of friends which were out who were outside. So I was just
see,
wondering if that was the same experience for you.
see, I came in here knowing very consciously that I wasn't going to just stay with the African circle.
Okay, that's me
Yeah,
too.
that
Yeah.
was something I already knew. Like, I remember my first week in Lubbock, I saw a sign, like a poster thing, and it says English classes, English conversation. And I was like, I mean, I was already fluent in English, but I was like, oh, I'm going to go make some friends. Right.
Okay.
So to me, so I did join the African Student Association in both universities and all of that. So I still wanted to keep that network and all of that, but I knew that I wasn't going to stay in that network. I got out of Morocco. I knew that, yes, I had Moroccan friends here and all of that, but I knew that I wanted to be exposed to more nationalities like Americans or Europeans or from all around.
Yeah, and that's what I say. I say it doesn't make sense for us to come all the way from Africa just to stick with other Africans.
Yeah.
Or like, what's the point? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a
so I
new
was,
experience.
yeah, that was like you too. Like, I like to explore. I like to have friends from different backgrounds, different races, different states. Because, like, even the states, people are different to like different states. Or even
Absolutely.
Africans, like, since I'm Kenyan and you're Moroccan or you're from the DRC, sometimes
Yes.
they stick to their own little groups. Like, I'm just going to hang out with the Kenyans or I'm just going to hang out with
Yeah.
the Cameroonians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
I
like,
think,
go
yeah,
ahead.
that's so true. And I think I was the only Congolese on campus. Or maybe there was like one other person or something. And I never met them until maybe the last semester or something. I never went looking for Congolese people or Moroccan people. Not really. I'm like, okay, whatever you are, whoever you are, wherever you're from, let's just hang out. But I did
Yeah,
make an
yeah.
effort to join the African Student Association and participate and be involved in all of that. I did. I did enjoy that
Okay.
for sure.
Okay. I didn't live on campus, so I didn't have I lived off of campus. I didn't have the
Yeah.
opportunity to join any of those groups, but and I was in the DC area, which is very diverse and it has
Right?
a lot of Africans from all over the world. So it was
Yeah, that's
easy for
true.
me to just stick to my African crew because
Hmm.
it's like comfort, what you already know. But I
Yes.
made an effort to spread out, to be like, okay, there's
Exactly.
no point of coming all the way and then just sticking
Yeah.
to the same
Right.
crew of people. Okay.
Right.
So then
Yeah.
now that's college, and then you finish off your masters, and then is that
Hmm.
when you got married after you finished your masters?
No, that's when I wanted to continue because I did my master's in hospitality management, but I didn't want to work in a hotel or a restaurant. And so my degree was hospitality. I was a hotel, restaurants, and institutional. So the institutional was the part that I was interested in, which was the tourism part. So that's why I went ahead and applied for a PhD in tourism. And that's what I did at A&M. I didn't want to work right away. And I wasn't like, this is not really what I want
Okay.
to do. I want to explore tourism a little more. And then that's what I did for my PhD.
So
So
can I say
yeah.
you're such an African, like a PhD in tourism? Like, there's a running joke that Africans love education. Like we are
We
gonna go to
do,
school
right?
until we're 100. There's always
Oh,
something
yeah.
to go to school for. So
Oh,
I'm like
yeah.
a
Always.
PhD in tourism. Did you
Yeah.
think you were gonna do something with that?
Yes. So what I did it's fascinating because uh, that the running joke in our department is that people think we just play frisbee all day because it's like we have a fun major type of thing, but it's not about becoming a tour guide or anything like that. I studied tourist behavior. Like for my dissertation, I
Okay.
was looking at the experiences of tourists at sites related to slavery, Holocaust, war. So people who go to honor veterans, to
Oh,
go to Auschwitz, who go to Elmina Castle in Ghana, things like that. Why did they go? What is the experiences? kind of message that these sites or museums or memorials put together? Is it the right story? Is it the winner story? Is it the loser story? All of these things. So it's really researching all these facets of tourism.
Oh, that's interesting. I would never have guessed that. I mean, I know you told me before you have a PhD in tourism, and I think I just left it at that. I was like, all right.
Yeah, fun.
I was like, okay, if she wants a PhD, okay, good for her, you know?
Right. And there, there's so many, like the overall, I would say the overall level on top of what I specifically do for my dissertation is heritage tourism. So it's people connecting with their heritage. So people who take their DNA thing, people who go to Ireland, for example, because they have Irish heritage, whatever. So that's the upper umbrella. Like these people are tourists, but they go there for their heritage. They don't just go there to visit the Eiffel Tower. But more specifically, I looked at the darker side of heritage, which is, like wars, slavery, things like that.
Slavery, yeah. It would be interesting to see a comparison of how the heritage for like the people who are like maybe let's say African Americans or even Africans who were born outside of Africa and them tracking their heritage back to Africa as compared to the European and the Irish and them tracking their heritage and what the feelings are, you know?
Absolutely.
Because I think usually with slavery, there's just so much emotion to it.
Yeah.
I'm sure, I don't want to dismiss this, I'm sure on the European side, there's also emotion, but it would be interesting to compare the two, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's basically kind of, I mean, my research didn't compare the two, but it looked at both sides. And I specifically wanted to share the message of the African side, mostly for African Americans here in the US when they visit those sites. But depending on where you go again in Europe, like for the Irish or for the French or whatever their history is, it can be painful or it can be, there can be pride associated to it, or it can be some pain or shame associated to it. So like, for example, if you're German heritage, or if you're, let's say German, Spanish, and Italian heritage, okay, there's some shady things in there in the 40s, right? But if you're a French, maybe a French heritage, or I don't know, or maybe if you're Swiss heritage, it's like, okay, you guys were just neutral, but what is that about? You just took everybody's money but you didn't say.
Like, what is exactly neutral?
Right? So there are different sides of the story, and depending on how you personally see it and perceive it, nobody should tell you, oh, shame on you, you should feel this way. No, it's a personal experience, and so it's fascinating to see
experience,
how different people perceive it and experience it.
And it is history, you know what I mean? It's like I always tell people since I'm East African, my experience of Africa is very different from a West African or a South African or a Central African, you know what I mean? Or a Northern African. So sometimes the experiences are so different. That reminds me of one time I went to South Africa with a group of people, like it was Africans, but from different parts of Africa. And I took it for granted that people have been on safari, I mean, I'm Kenyan. You see animals, you go on safari or whatever. But there's some of the girls were from West Africa, and this was fascinating for them.
Right.
And I was so confused. I was like, you're African. Why would this be fascinating? In my head, I thought, if you're white or if you're American or whatever, or foreign, I can kind of see why this is fascinating. But in my head, I just assumed you're African. Why would this be fascinating?
I've never been on a safari.
Oh, see, exactly. See, something like that, where we just all think. And also, it's interesting because when you're in the US, people are just like, "Oh, you're African," but Africa is like the second largest continent in the world. In the world, it has a lot of countries, and then within the countries, there's different subgroups and dialects, and there's just so many tribes. The cultures are so different.
Absolutely.
So that's another conversation where I'm like, I don't know where to start this conversation, but I'm just going to leave it as Africa. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know.
Okay, so now you finish, you finish your school, you finish your PhD, and then do you move from? So
I finished all the coursework. I was writing the dissertation and finishing up the dissertation. I was going to. My defense was in let's say, I think it was September, and then I was going to graduate that December. But I had already accepted a teaching job starting that August. So I started teaching at Wiley College. Have you seen the movie The Great Debaters with Denzel Washington?
No, I haven't. And maybe I should have, but
that's it's okay. That's the school. It's actually a real school and everything. So it's a debate. It's an HBCU. So the story is about the debate team that beat Harvard University or something like that. So I went to teach at that school for a year, and then I got married, and so I moved down to Houston, and then the following semester I got hired by my former school where I graduated from, and I started teaching there, and I taught there for 3 years, I think, 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was your teaching experience like, being an African immigrant with an accent and teaching in an American school? How was that experience?
I would say because I was already teaching during my PhD, so I was, as a graduate student, you have to teach and all of that, which I love. That's my favorite thing to do. And it was a great opportunity. Nobody ever asked me where you're from. I just told them, hey, this is where I'm from. And I mean, it's
So
teaching tourism.
Volunteered.
So I tell them about cultures. I tell them about, hey, this is what we do here. This is what we do here. And this is like exposing them to new things. And A&M is a school, obviously conservative. And a lot of the kids who go there have maybe never traveled outside of Texas, most of them. Right.
Whoa.
So it was because it's very heavy on farming, and, it's the A&M part of the school. Right. So the engineers, the farming, the all of that. And a lot of the kids come from narrow towns around, smaller town or bigger towns from around the school. And a lot of them obviously have been outside of the country and all of that, but I would say the majority have not. And so I saw it as an opportunity for them. I mean, you have a very diverse faculty all around the campus. And so it's a great opportunity for the kids to be exposed to different cultures, different accents, different point of views, and all of that. So it was really great. My experience at A&M, being a primarily white college, and my experience at Wiley College, being an HBCU, was completely different.
I know. Could you share some of those differences?
Yes, because growing up in Morocco, I've always been surrounded by majority non-Black people, right? Morocco is, I would say, brown people, right? But not Black.
Yeah.
Not quite white, though. Even though a lot of Moroccans, I would say, consider themselves white. But that's another story.
Exactly. That's a whole other conversation. And some of them don't even consider themselves Africans. I'm like, that's a whole other conversation.
And I grew up in the most north part of Morocco, and so we speak Spanish there because Spain is so close.
Yeah.
And so a lot of them see themselves as Spanish, but I'm like, no, you're not Spanish. You are African. You're Moroccan.
You are on the continent. Just remember that.
You're here. Come back. One of us. So now going to a school where most people are Black, it was amazing. It was such a cool experience because most of the students are Black. Most of the staff and faculty are Black. A lot of them are not Black, like maybe Indian or Jordanian or things like that. But the majority is Black. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is super cool. Like, you feel like a sense of, I don't know if I want to say relaxation a little bit, but it's like, it's like, this is like, you relax a little bit. I can
relate to that. I was lucky because I came to the DC area, and like I said, DC is considered chocolate city. Washington DC, it's considered chocolate city. You know what I mean? So there's Black people from all walks of life everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I was lucky. That was my introduction to the US. I didn't feel like so different. But I have to tell you, when I moved to California,
right,
and I wasn't like in middle California. I was in Los Angeles. That was the first time I realized I was like, I am Black.
You're a minority.
Because, actually talking about that, because, for most of us Africans, I don't know what your experience is, but for the most part, it's like, okay, like you never really think about your Blackness so much, because like we didn't grow up like that. Like in Kenya, I
Yeah.
can tell you it was more about the tribal thing. Like, oh, I'm this tribe or I'm that tribe, I'm that tribe.
Right.
So that's like usually what's prime, but most of us look alike, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I came
Exactly.
to DC, when I came to DC, I was lucky my transition was just like, okay, there's other black people. But when I came to California, I was like, all right, I am black. You know? And then when I moved to where I live right now, like
Yeah.
literally, honestly, I used to think that I'm walking out of this building and everyone is watching me. Like that's how it was just like so different. And I had
Wow.
never felt that because I had lived in
Yeah.
DC for like almost 20 years and I had never had that experience. So for the first time, I
Yeah.
actually could understand what other people say when they say they feel different. Because
Yes.
when people used to say they feel different to me, I was just like, okay, that's not my problem.
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? But that was for the first time I went seeking. Like I had never seeked people who look like me. I went
Wow.
seeking people who look like me. Like I decided I was like I'm gonna join like some African American club around here. It was far. It was like 45 minutes drive, but I'm like I need to see black people. I'm just gonna join
Yeah.
it. I mean, but the fascinating part about that, this is when I was in DC. I joined this group. It was an African American tech group, technology group,
Ooh.
because my background is in IT. So I was like, this is perfect. The black people, they're in IT. I'm in
Yeah.
IT, perfect. So I go to this group, and again, the attention was on me because the accent, and I'm African. And this is something I had never had in DC because, again, DC has a lot of immigrants. And then I was like, oh my
Yes.
God, I'm still foreign. Even amongst my own black people, I'm still foreign because now everyone was just fascinated about me being African and
Yeah.
having an accent. And I realized California doesn't have a lot of African immigrants. It has immigrants, but it's like Mexican, Koreans, Filipino.
Right.
It doesn't
Right.
have a lot of African immigrants. There's few and far in between, and they're spread out. And that's where the fascination was coming in. So again, that was another elevation for me where I was like, okay, I thought I finally found my group, but then here I am, the foreigner again among
Within that group.
within that group. But that is interesting. Okay, so going back to you.
Yeah.
Now, so now you get married, I'm assuming you start a family,
Yeah.
and you decide to live in Houston, right?
Yeah. So we've been in
and
Houston ever since. Yeah.
ever since. Okay, so I know you run your own business right now. How did that
Yes.
transition from being a PhD in tourism, which
Yeah.
sounds like fun, now that you've explained to me what that's all about? Because now I'm curious, because I like history. I like a lot of
Yes.
history. So now I'm curious. I'm like, oh, I didn't have no clue I could have like this whole other experience doing tourism and learning
Yeah.
about cultures and stuff like that.
When
So
you
now
go
I'm
visit
see-
sites, people actually study you. When you go to museums, people study you.
There's people like you on the corner
Yes.
with notepads. The creepy people with notepads. The funny thing though is, I'm just gonna say this. This is something I'm like, only white people have such majors. It's one of those things I'm like, only white people would have such a major. Now then here you are, an African girl with a PhD in a tourism major,
Yeah.
So was there a lot of was it like a mixed group of people in this PhD, or were you the one and the only black people, or is it because of the school where you are? What do you think?
It's funny because it's so broad because the department is recreation, parks, and tourism sciences. So for example, there was another. So within tourism, so in the tourism branch of it, there's conservation, there's commercial tourism, like cruises and things like that. And I'm not really into that. There's community-based tourism, sustainable tourism. So different facets of it. And so there's one of our professors, her specialty was conservation. She's an anthropologist and all of that. And a lot of her research focused on in Botswana, in the Volta area and all of that. So a lot of her students were from Botswana. So the Africans who were in the department other than me were her students, and they were studying the relationship between, for example, elephants and humans and how to coexist. and things like, and that's within tourism, right? So the whole,
That is so fascinating.
how you use tourism money, like maybe from safaris and things like that, to make sure that there's no exploitation, to make sure that there's coexistence and things like that. So there are different, like, it's very broad, like even within the small branch of tourism. For me was heritage tourism, more specifically slavery, war, and things like that. But within the same department, other people were looking at cruise tourism, like things like that, or other people were looking at festivals, and other people were looking at missionaries. Like, I was like, whoa, this is so fascinating, but all within the same umbrella of tourism.
Oh, so missionaries are put in that umbrella of tourism.
So technically, since they do it for work, if it's considered work, so they are not considered tourists. But
I know.
The study of it was something that some people were studying here in our department too.
Which is interesting. I would like to study missionaries for other reasons, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, or even like medical tourism, like going to Mexico to get your teeth fixed, or surgery in India, things like that. All that is medical tourism. So that's another part of the field too.
I kind of feel like I just need to have a whole other show with you to break down this whole PhD in tourism. Because, like, if I'm being honest, like, this is my ignorance showing. I was like, why did Linda, out of all the PhDs, because you know Africans, a PhD is going to be a PhD in medical something.
Oh, yeah,
you know what
it has to be. Pharmacy,
it has to
or
be
engineering, math.
Engineering, you have to make some sort of robot. You know?
Of course. That's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, you don't take a PhD in tourism. Like, that's fun play. Like, why are you having fun? Okay.
Exactly. That's a waste. Waste of money, waste of time.
So I want to dig into your business, you know. So now you finish, you do your teaching, and then after a while, you said you taught for 3 years, and then you decided to branch into your own business.
Yes. So I had started my business. So when I got married, so I moved down to Houston, and so I was in between jobs in a way, right? I didn't have a job yet, and I was looking for different jobs, and I was like, okay, what do I want to do? So I started a travel blog. I just wanted to talk about travel. So at
this time, you have how many kids? One or
I didn't
two?
have any kids. I just had married.
At that point, okay.
And then so that was in 2012.
Okay.
In 2012, got married. So moved down to Houston to get married. So that's the fall of 2012. No job, no nothing. No job, no kids, just married. And I started my travel blog because I just wanted to talk about travel all the time. I love travel, languages, and things like that.
Yeah, I do too.
Right? And so I just started travel, not to make money, but just to talk about travel. And then that January, so in the spring, I started working at A&M. And so I've always been fast. That's when I started discovering the whole coaching word and all of that. And I was like, oh, this is fun. So I was doing it on the side, like, oh, this is great, learning things and things like that. And in 2016, so 3 years later, I was like, okay, I'm going to start hiring somebody to help me with this whole coaching thing. So that's when I started getting really serious about, okay, I need to build this as a business. So it was in 2016, and I left my job December of 2016. So to go full time on my business.
And what is your business?
So, and it shifted a little bit because when I left, it was more focused on helping women to start businesses online, right? And then it shifted a little bit with goal setting. And then a year later, I narrowed it down to content marketing. So that's what I do now. I help people create content for social media.
Okay. And if somebody wants to be in touch with you, where do they go? Give us all the goodies.
On Facebook. Facebook is my happy place. So they find me.
You're the only one. I can say, please tell Mark Zuckerberg, Mark, I'm the only one who really likes your platform. You and maybe 5 other people.
I know people hate on Facebook, but I just love it. I love it. Not so much Instagram, because Instagram requires a lot of editing, and I do not like editing. I don't like editing pictures because it's more about the picture, and I don't have time for that. So I'm barely on Instagram. LindaEnoh.com, it's my website, or on Facebook, you can type Linda Lelo Enoh. Lelo is my maiden name, and you'll find me in there. You find my business page, and you can join my free Facebook group and all of that. So
yeah, and I'll put all these details on the notes for you. I just wanted you to say it out loud. But you're right. Like, yeah, I like Facebook also, like Facebook groups, because there's more interaction.
Yeah.
I like to interact with people. Like, I like this. Like what we're doing.
Yes.
I could sit here and talk to people for hours, and just dig their brain and ask information and ask.
Yes.
I'm nosy. So anyone who you tell to come to my podcast, just tell them I'm just gonna be asking questions. Okay. And I know your game, so I love
this
is why
too.
I wanted you as my first guest. I was like, Linda would be perfect. So what? I actually forgot on the census. What do you put on the census? Do you put, like they have that bracket, like Black/African American, and then they have the section that says other. What do you check?
I just put Black.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just whatever they say African American, I'm like, yeah, it's me.
It's funny, if I'm being honest, I have like transitioned, because when I first came, I was still so stuck to my African roots, and I'm African and I'm not American and blah blah blah. And so the first census, because I've been here a long time, the first census, if I can remember, they didn't have the option of Black. They just had African American, and then they had other. Yeah, if I'm not wrong, that's what I remember. So at that time, which I was in Virginia, it doesn't count, because it depends where. I put other, and I was like, and I wrote in African, because I was just like, what the hell? Why are they assuming everyone is whatever? But as time went by, I remember now they changed and they put in the thing for Black and African American. And like I told you, after I moved to California, I was like, I don't care where you are, what part of the world you come from, as long as I can see somebody who looks like me.
Yes.
I'm Black. So sometimes our I say that story to say sometimes our experiences in the US kind of start changing, and they kind of dictate or form who you are, based on where you are. Yeah, because again, going back to people who live in the Washington, D.C. area, they take it for granted, because you see so many Africans, you see so many Black people from everywhere, and you're fine. But if you're African and you came from Africa, seeing a whole lot of people who look like you, and then you come to the Midwest, or you come to one of these just like totally areas where you're the only Black person, it can really have an effect on you, and you can really just have a difference. So my advice to people, because I also want this podcast to be advised, it's like it's okay to seek for people who look like you. Don't feel bad about that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And your identity changes a little bit, like through time and all of that. And also I don't know if it's I guess maybe the only reason why I'm comfortable saying African American is because I'm a U.S. citizen now, right? Since I got married, my husband is American and all of that. But if I wasn't a citizen, I would never say African American, because technically I wouldn't be American. But
so that's how
I'm comfortable saying that because I'm a citizen. Otherwise, I would just say Black. And if there's an option, I would say other or African or something like that. But because I'm a citizen, I feel like I have the right to say American because I'm a citizen, right? But otherwise, I would have never said African. I would have feel like an African American would tell me, no, you're not.
Or because you don't have the citizenship part.
Exactly, because it's nothing about me that says I'm American other than my papers. You know what I mean?
Okay.
That's how
That's how it's interesting how you look at that. I use it interchangeably, Okay. But I settle more for Black, because I'm like, wherever I go in the world, if I'm in the middle of Ukraine, I'm Black.
Yeah, I've never said I'm African American, actually. I've never said it. It's only if they ask me and they give me the option to put it, I will say it. But I've always said Black.
Yeah.
Because I feel like
I
it
use it interchangeably.
More.
Yeah. I usually say Black. Black is like my default, And for the same reasons like you. Like, I feel as if African American is reserved for, like people who are born here, raised here, their culture and whatever. For me, I feel as if, even though technically, once you become a citizen, we are truly African and American. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, that one, I use it sparingly. But Black is my default.
Yeah,
Don't get
same.
it twisted. When I walk down the street, I'm Black.
Yeah, same here.
When I'm in the middle of the desert, I'm Black. So Black is usually my default.
Me too.
Okay, so then now, and I know you also do trips to Morocco. I want if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was within my business. That was one of the offers that I was putting forward. It was a retreat. So I have now with the pandemic, but so it's because I've always been fascinated with travel, languages, and all of that. And so I put together a retreat to Morocco where we get to work on your content, but in the comfort of Morocco instead of being online on Zoom or anywhere in Texas or anywhere, but doing it in Morocco where you can be pampered and you can go to the hammam and visit sites, and you don't have to do laundry, you don't have to do dishes, you don't have to drive nobody to school. You're taken care of and you have all the time and the support that you need to work on your content and rejuvenate and rest a little bit too.
And who else to take you to a trip to Morocco other than Linda, who was born in Morocco, and lived there for most of her life, and who has a PhD in tourism. So she's going to tell you what to look out for and make, seriously. So who else better than you,
It's funny. If I can, I'm going to share a little anecdote about that. On our honeymoon with my husband, we went to Maui in Hawaii. And we went to one of those Cirque du Soleil type shows, but it was Polynesian. And at the end of the show, we had a chance to interact with the cast, like answer question and all that. And so everybody was asking questions about the show and things like that. And then I asked one of the cast, and my husband took a picture of me, like questioning, I think he would say interrogating one of the cast members. And I wanted to know the significance of him doing this show that it represents his heritage. So I went full on PhD on him, and my husband was like, dude, why are you doing that? The guy's just trying to make a living. But I had to study the thing, right? I had to turn on the research brain on, and because to me it was fascinating, because it's not just, maybe for him it was just like working at McDonald's, like it's a job, just like any other job. But I wanted to know if it had any kind of personal significance, if it made him proud of, because he was talking about his ancestor story. My husband was like, just let it go. And
I like that though. Like seriously, the more I talk to you, the more I'm like, I'm gonna ping you on the side. We gotta do something, because I don't have a PhD in anything. I'm one of the few Africans who does not have. Don't even say yet. I refuse. I'm like, I cannot live my whole life in school. I can say I have a master's. So maybe I'm African enough. African enough. You have to have a PhD to be full African.
Put on my charter. Yeah.
But so I'm gonna ping you on the side, because those are things that fascinate me. I like knowing about people's stories, people's backgrounds, why they do things that they do in certain ways. I know we don't have a time for this, but in another time, if you're willing to be my guest again,
of course, definitely.
In another time we could actually dive deeper and talk about race, because that's another thing that fascinates me. Like most people, when they think Africa, they think, Black people, which is true. There's a predominant number of Black people in Africa, But Africa, being African does not necessarily mean being Black.
Right. I lived in Morocco, and I was a minority as a Black person.
Exactly. You know what I mean? And it's fascinating to see why some of those Moroccans don't think they're African. Like, what is it so bad about being African? These are the questions I would like to ask people, and not on a judgment perspective. Just curious. Like, why is it that you feel that you have to identify with one other than the other, especially when it comes to being Black, or it comes to relating yourself to being an African?
That's a great question. I would love to discuss that for sure.
We should dig deeper than that. I'll create a little panel and we can do that. So in closing, what advice would you give to a new African immigrant who's either planning to come to the U.S. or who's on their way here or who's already here? Maybe 1 month in, a couple of months, let's say a year in. What advice would you give them?
I would say to be open to learning new things, because you are going to learn new things just by your first day, your first week. And yes, you're going to make mistakes because it's new, but that's just part of the transition. Don't be so attached to where you're coming from. Sure, you're not going to lose it. Don't feel like you're going to lose a part of you. It's just, you're just going to add and enrich what you already have. So just be open to learning new things. That's
very good advice. Yeah, because I think for the most part, most of us, some of us fear that we're losing our culture, that we're losing our roots, what we know of, which now that I've been here for so long, and when I go back and visit, I'm like, what is even my culture? Because even in Africa, life is moving, things are changing, culture is dynamic. You know what I mean?
They're not waiting for you.
They're not waiting for you. Yeah. So here I am holding on to what I knew when I was there. And then when I go and visit, it's like, oh, no one does that anymore. You know what I mean? People have moved on. A quick story. I remember then, like 2 Christmases ago, not in 2020, but 2019, I went to Kenya, and I was hanging out with my nephews and my nieces, in the village. Like, we had gone to the village to visit where my mom lives, and I was hanging out with them, and they were just giving me different stories. And then, of course, with technology, the world is this small with technology. Because everyone has iPhones, even in the village. Everyone has iPhones. So interaction is so fast. They were so good at using the iPhone more than me. Like, they showed me apps and things that I was using. So we're having this like really deep discussion with my nephew, where he tells me he's decided he doesn't want to use his native name. Like, because, like in Africa, the way I have Lucy Winamo, like my Winamo is my dad's name, but it was the traditional name. Right. And he says he wants his last name to be, like, he has a middle name, so he just wants his last name to be Charles, Robert Charles.
Okay.
And I'm like, and I was like so offended. I was like, what? Are you trying not to associate yourself with being Luya? Luya is my tribe, right? I'm like, why would you not want to associate yourself with being Luya? Yeah. And he went down to explain to me, he's like, there's so much tribalism in Kenya. And when people see your name, they judge you by the name before even knowing who you are or what you can do. So then he told me, so I've decided I'm just going to call myself Robert Charles.
Look at that.
And I was like, okay. But then I was like, no, but that's not the solution. Like we need to be proud of our names. You know what I mean? I'm like, why are we... I felt as if, like, why are we recolonizing ourselves? Why are we still stuck in colonization? But I kind of understood his perspective, where he was like, I'm trying to solve this tribalism problem. And I'm trying for people to see me for who I am and not by my name,
That's a smart move too.
I know. But I remember telling them, I was like, I don't think the problem is culture though. I think the problem is how people perceive different cultures. Because I was like, in the past historical times before colonization, there were different cultures in Africa. There were different people from different parts. And we coexisted. You know what I mean? We respected each other. We did trade amongst each other. We coexisted. So I'm like, we could actually go back to that. And I was like, you can keep your name, but it's how the respect that you treat the other person and know that they're human beings, even though they're a different tribe from you, But you can't run away from that and say, I'm just going to mask this by using an English name, Yeah. But it was interesting having that conversation with them, because here I am thinking I'm in the village, in the thick of my tribe, because most villages are about tribes. And then here is somebody telling me I am not, and they don't even speak the language. They want to speak English or like the national language, which is Swahili. Like rarely do they speak the native language, which is Luya. And I thought, my God, here I am in the US hoping the good old times in Kenya, and the good old times are gone. Good old times are so gone. But anyway, Linda, thank you so much for taking time to come and spend this morning with me.
Thank you
for having me. If there's anything in closing, let me know. You can. I know you have a website where people can go to, which is what again?
Yes, lindaeno.com. As easy as that.
As easy as that. And that will lead them to the different parts where they can find you on Facebook, your trip to Morocco. Your trip to Morocco, I'm telling you, one of these days, I will scrounge money somewhere and I have to come on that trip.
You need to come. It's going to be a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
All right. Bye. Bye-bye.